How are we doing, ladies and gentlemen? We've got a Bulls game later today where we'll be taking on the Rockets in Houston. But first, you know what day it is. It is Hot Takes Wednesday, where I feature and react to your Bulls hot takes from the week. So if you're new to the channel, feel free to leave any takes that you have below in the comments, and I will do my best to include them in next week's video. Also, if you are new to the channel, consider subscribing if you like the content, as I am trying to reach 20,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I would very much appreciate it. Also, a big thank you to MyBookie for sponsoring this video, but more on that in a little bit. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Let's get kicked off with our first hot take, which comes to us from Monstar23. Billy Donovan is not the coach on a title contender. It's not his rotations. We look unprepared on offense. ISO ball won't work all the time. I made a video last season actually talking about Billy Donovan and what his future would look like as a Bulls coach, because I do agree to an extent that Billy Donovan likely isn't a coach that can lead a team to a championship. And in that video, I had actually talked about how it was possible that Billy Donovan was really the type of coach hired by this new front office as a stepping stone to develop the young players, establishing a winning culture, and then hire a championship level coach once Billy Donovan has essentially fulfilled his role. And then, of course, the front office accelerated their timeline by trading for Vucevic and, of course, bringing in Lonzo and DeRozan in the offseason, so that theory kind of went out the window. But what I will say is that I wasn't a huge fan of the Billy Donovan signing when it was first announced. Like, sure, it was better than Boylan and Hoiberg, but in my view, this wasn't a game-changing hire. And I have been pleasantly surprised with Billy Donovan thus far, mainly because the players respect him and buy into his system. His flaws aside, the players respect him, and that goes a long way when it comes to motivating guys on the team. But you're right, I do question a lot of Billy Donovan's decisions, especially when it comes to his rotations. Like starting Coby White the other night against the Pacers instead of Javonte Green when you're facing Turner and Sabonis in the front court. Yeah, not the best idea. Not giving a guy like Alizé that many minutes when you're in need of some size, with Vucevic and Patrick Williams being out, to me doesn't make a ton of sense. And then, of course, he sometimes pulls certain units out from the floor back to the bench. When that unit goes on a run, momentum is on their side, and it completely throws off the rhythm and flow of the game. Granted, he is a professional coach. I am not, and I'm sure he knows much better than I do. But yeah, I mean, when I look at Billy Donovan's track record in the NBA, I'm not talking about college, because we all know that he was a very successful college coach, but there have been a lot of great college coaches who were brought to the NBA and became horrible coaches. But coaching at the NBA level is just a different game. So for Billy Donovan, for the most part, aside from his last season in Oklahoma City, has kind of underperformed. He looked like he was potentially going to win a title in his first season with Kevin Durant and Westbrook, and then he blew the 3-1 lead in the Eastern Conference Finals. Again, not really all Billy Donovan's fault. And then after KD bounced, his teams were okay, but even after getting Paul George, he still was never able to make it past the first round. His last season in Oklahoma City was very impressive, though, when most teams thought that they would be one of the worst in the league, and ultimately they made the playoffs and almost won in that first round against the Rockets. And then, of course, last season with the Bulls was a pretty big disappointment. Not saying that all of it was his fault again, but the Bulls finishing 11th and missing the play-in was pretty bad when you look at what the roster had. But anyway, I'm rambling on about this one quite a bit. In short, yes, I see where you're coming from. Ultimately, Billy Donovan might not be the type of coach on a title contending team, but there are a lot of aspects about Billy Donovan's coaching that can at least inspire players to have a winning mentality, and he's a much better coach than some of the previous coaches that we've had in the past. Next, we've got Shizno. Oh man, he even changed his username to clarify for me how to say it. Sorry, my man. You guys know I am not good at pronunciations, but I've got it now. Shizno. And the take is, Kevin Love is a dark horse candidate for the Bulls to look at during the buyout period. His skill set allows the Bulls to continue playing their small ball play style with an additional big body to help stretch the floor and help Vucevic with the rebounding load. DeMar completely revitalized his career playing in a winning situation. Who's to say that K-Love can't do the same? Let me start with your final statement, because yes, DeMar is having an incredible season thus far, but first of all, it's too early in the season to consider this to be a revitalization to his career. And second, DeRozan had still been balling out even ever since leaving the Raptors. He wasn't as recognized for it as he was previously, but the dude was always putting up over 20 points per game. He elevated his game even further by becoming a playmaker. Now, comparing that to Kevin Love, who, yes, I agree, is still a serviceable player, but he has completely fallen off from his All-Star and All-NBA days. Going to a winning situation would not revitalize his career to the point where we would see the old Kevin Love from, say, 5 to 6 years ago. But what I do agree with is that on a winning team, and on a winning team that needs a stretch 4 type player, he could have a bit of a bounce back when given the opportunity to showcase that he's still a good NBA player. And with his ability to stretch the floor, but also be another big that can crash the boards, that would be a huge pickup for the Bulls in a buyout type scenario where you could really get him on the vet minimum deal. Doesn't solve the Bulls' defensive problems in the front court, but one step at a time. The problem, though, is I don't see Love getting bought out just because it has been expressed before by his camp that they have no interest in a buyout deal with the Cavs. And you can blame him. He's on such a massive, lucrative deal to just say, okay, I'll give that money back when all that was guaranteed. Next up, we've got Yusuke Urameshi. The Bulls ride the season out with their current big situation. They wait till free agency to make another splash or try and strike gold in the draft. With our success, players will want to play in Chicago. So I like the take, but I have to say I disagree. I mean, the only way the Bulls ride out their current situation with lack of bigs is if they simply cannot make a trade for any of them or find any on the buyout market and it's just all but dried up. I mean, the Bulls have to address this issue, even if it's just a temporary fix for the rest of the season. I'm not trying to sound alarmist because I think ultimately the Bulls will be fine and they'll still be able to play well even with their current roster that they have in place. But if the game against the Pacers was any indicator that in order to compete in the playoffs, you need to have more size than what the Bulls are currently playing with. I'm not saying that will apply to every team that they could potentially face in the playoffs, because there are some East teams the Bulls likely wouldn't have to worry about when it comes to their size if they face them. But say in the unlikely scenario they face a team like the Pacers in the first round, or the Sixers for that matter, the Bulls are going to have a hard time winning that series, regardless of the talent level that they have in the backcourt. So I really don't think the front office is just going to sit back and ride it out until the offseason. I think they'll absolutely make some kind of move to bring in front court depth, whether that be via a trade or signing a buyout candidate, even if it means that it's just for a half-year rental type player, and then they'll fully address the issue in the offseason. Before I get into the rest of the takes though, guys, a quick word from the sponsor of this video, MyBookie. MyBookie is an online sports betting platform that enables you to bet sports with an edge. I'm always looking for an edge whenever I'm going out and betting, but at MyBookie, they're giving you an edge right off the bat by doubling your first deposit. So you start with a leg up, head to MyBookie and sign up now using promo code BC23 to get your money doubled. That's right, they're going to match your first deposit when you use my code, and you can start winning today. And as an added bonus, if you have your buddies use your referral link and you sign up, you're eligible to receive an additional 250% bonus on that first deposit. Plus, it's unlimited to redeem, so all of your friends can join the party at MyBookie. Use promo code BC23. Sign up now, claim your first deposit bonus with MyBookie, and use the extra funds to kickstart your winning season. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. Now, with that, let's get back into the takes. Our next take comes to us from Alejandro Delgado. Io will be putting up the same kind of numbers as a Jalen Green if given the same opportunity. I mean, I wouldn't go that far. I do agree that if I was playing on a bad team like the Rockets, he would get more run and put up better numbers as a result. And I completely agree that Jalen Green's numbers are inflated because he's on such a bad team. He's a very talented player on offense, but his defense is atrocious. And if you actually look at the numbers, he's incredibly inefficient. Like, yes, he's scoring over 14 points per game, which is decent for a rookie, but the dude is shooting 37% from the field and 27% from three, while also turning the ball over more than he actually racks up in assists, and has a terrible PER of 7.7, whereas Io isn't scoring as much but is shooting the ball considerably better, especially from three and from the field, and he's a much better defender. So I get what you're saying with this, but I do think it's a bit of a stretch to say that Io will be putting up better numbers even on a bad team, because there is something to be said about Jalen Green's talent, and I think even Io, well, if he was put into a similar situation, he likely wouldn't be able to score at the level Green has, but I do agree his numbers would look better on a worse team. Next, we've got Benny DeBully. Bulls trade Nikola Vucevic, first-round pick, and Coby White to the Pacers for Sabonis. Whoa there, buddy. I mean, I really like Sabonis, but that's a bit too much for him. Not only that, but you make that trade and the Bulls still have an issue at center, as Sabonis is a power forward, and then what happens to Patrick Williams when he comes back? Like, Sabonis is a great player, don't get me wrong, but he can't spread the floor as well as Vucevic can. with his outside shooting. I know Vucevic has struggled with his scoring so far this season, but normally speaking, Vucevic is also a better scorer than Sabonis, and he's an equally good rebounder as Sabonis is. Not only that, but you're also throwing in Coby White and a first for Domantas Sabonis. Nah, man, way too much. If it was a straight swap for Vucevic and Sabonis, that I would consider, just because Sabonis is only 25 and still has upside, whereas Vucevic has likely already hit his peak. But also throwing in Coby and first, to me, that's too much. Like, if you're putting that kind of package together, you can get considerably more than someone just like Sabonis. Next, we've got the Benny. When all is said and done, DeRozan is going to go down as the best free agent signing in Bulls history. So initially when I read this, I thought, okay, that is a bit of recency bias to the extreme. But then, when I took a step back and thought about it more, you kind of have a point, because the Bulls under the old front office were so bad at bringing in free agents, there really isn't a lot that you can compare it to. I mean, I would say the best free agent signing in Bulls history, again, just free agents, we're not talking about trades or players they drafted, the best one was probably Pau Gasol, and that was already after Gasol was past his prime, even though he was still an all-star then. Boozer, I mean, maybe 1 or 2 good seasons when he was first brought over. Dwayne Wade, that was a disaster. Ben Wallace was also past his prime. I guess it all just depends on how you classify best free agents in terms of whether it's best player, because you could argue there were better free agent signings based on value in terms of the contracts that were offered to them. Even a guy like Alex Caruso, you could say, was the best value signing. But yeah, I mean, it's still way too early, because DeRozan has only played 18 games with the Bulls in his career with the team, and obviously he would need to maintain the level of play, or close to it anyway, to be considered the best free agency signing in Bulls history. But early returns of what he's shown to be able to do thus far would indicate that he potentially will be. Let's do one more, and this is a flaming hot take. This one comes to us from Tyron Tijo. Zach LaVine is the best player the Bulls have had since Michael Jordan. Better than Prime D Rose and better than Butler. Okay, so I'm going to assume that since Jordan, you mentioned Jordan, this doesn't include Scottie Pippen. Basically, you're saying any player after 1998, although Pippen played his last year in the league with the Bulls in 2004, I believe it was, because no, LaVine is not better than Pippen. Even for all the crazy things that Pippen has been saying recently, he's still the second greatest Bull of all time. But even Pippen aside, no, I'm sorry. LaVine is not a better player than prime Derrick Rose. I think people forget just how insanely good Rose was before he got injured. Like, there is a reason he led his team to the best record in the NBA and winning MVP at the age of 22, and not even with an incredible supporting cast. Don't get me wrong, Noah, Dang, Boozer, those guys were all huge pieces on that 2011 team, but Rose at that time was the only all-star on that team. He didn't have another all-star player playing alongside him, and the Bulls still won 62 games. Like, that's not forget that LaVine has still yet to make the playoffs. That's going to change this year, but he's nowhere on the level of Rose was when he was in his prime. I know some people will say, well, if you look at their numbers, LaVine scored more than Rose did in his MVP season and did it on better efficiency. Yeah, but the NBA was different then. The NBA was not as heavily predicated on three-point shooting as it is today, or as high on offense as it is today. Not only that, but Rose was a much better passer and a better protector of the ball, limiting his turnovers, something that Zach LaVine still continues to struggle with. And again, numbers aside, Rose led his team to the best record in the NBA when he was 22. Until LaVine can prove to be a #1 option on at least a playoff contending team, let alone title contending team, then no, he's not the best Bull since Jordan. Jimmy Butler, I mean, that's a little bit different. There is an argument to be made there. I know this isn't going to be a popular opinion, because I actually think that the Bulls needed to move on from Butler because of his ego issues, but in terms of who is the better player, I mean, you can't deny that Jimmy is a significantly better defender than LaVine is, and overall a smarter player. For all of his flaws, meaning Jimmy's flaws, he's not as efficient of a scorer as Zach is, but overall, I would say at this point, it's hard to even put Zach ahead of Jimmy Butler as the best player since Michael Jordan. I do think that after Rose and Butler, yes, LaVine is the greatest player since Michael Jordan to ever put on a Chicago Bulls uniform. Again, assuming we're not also including Scottie Pippen in that. Anyway, guys, I'll wrap it up there for this week. Be sure to leave your hot takes below to be included in next week's video. Don't forget, the Bulls will be taking on the Rockets tonight. I'll have a live group chat, both here and on the channel, as well as the Discord. Be sure to join the Discord if you're interested, by the way. And guys, as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.